Draw of the new turn, I get the Istria command. This isn't good because I'm holding a mandatory card, which I have to play. This gives the Austrians a couple of units back, well, a couple of disorders back that are in a really helpful situation. They don't have to be in supply, I think. I don't know. Again, the damn supply rules are so sort of tacked on. I don't see anything about this in the instructions here. It may be that I can't resupply those. I seem to remember something in the question threads that was like, oh no, you have to be in supply. You know, I don't know. But that was weeks ago, or over a week ago, that I looked at that, and I just don't feel like doing it. You know, to some extent, it would make sense. You can argue this either way. But anyway, after I played that mandatory card, if I have to play a card anyway, I'm going to play this one since it's the beginning of the turn. This is going to actually hurt the Venetians in terms of dropping their morale too low, but we'll do something about that in terms of supplies, rating, whatever. You know what I mean. And I'll look up, maybe Istria can raid into here, even though this is one of the areas Austria can raid. Who knows? Because they're defined in very different sorts of ways. So this is going to be a pestilence, and it's just going to wipe out everything. But the biggie is I get to shorten the game a little bit, and I'm pretty happy with the victory point situation as it stands. A little bit of annoyance here. So what happens if you disorder a disordered unit? Like, let's say I have a stack of entirely disordered units and there were disordered results. Normally in combat, a hit on a disordered unit is something different from what's described in this card. This card says disorganize a unit. That seems to imply to me that, you know, it's like the oversupply thing. You're not just going to be killing units. It's their worst state is disorganized, but with higher numbers, units are just removed. Well, in that case, what happens if I disorganize a unit that cannot be disorganized? What's up with that? Is it destroyed? Is it not? Again, not covered in the rules. I took it as a kill, but I'm not sure that's the case. And it's not just this card that it affects. It affects the overstacking rules, which are actually basic game rules. I don't think I can disorganize the unit, to tell you the truth. So let me put this back here. And I'm just, well, yeah, I think I'm okay with that. I think I'm okay with that. And likewise, these guys are in the same space as these guys. So that's actually a destroy a unit marker. Okay, I'll just take a death there and keep working my way up. Really, across the board, done a lot of damage. It's also reduced morales, and in particular, the Venetian morale is too low. Now let me check the raid rolls again. The Venetian area. Areas with green map background to the east of Gradisca. Yeah, I'm allowed to raid in Istria. Unfortunately, if I do a raid, let me look at the rules on that. I don't think I have to leave. But that's going to trigger a battle that I may not want in there. But I may not mind it. Every raid attempt... Well, first of all, I'm out of supply, so I can only send 2 units. So, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Okay, so... no bonuses for me in terms of the Istria command being able to move. There's nothing that prevents me from raiding the territory I'm in. Ha! Yeah, I can do it in the territory I'm in. What the hell? And I'm just, I guess, pillaging my people. I do not succeed. technically I get an activated marker there, but I don't care. I could move if I wanted to, but I don't particularly want to. And we move on to the next jet. Eventually, here we have a truce card. Both sides meet at Caruglio to define a truce. Advance the game turn marker one position forward on the timeline. All the other stuff has been moved one position back the final turn marker on the timeline. Now, I don't know which way I would see it, but I guess back is towards the beginning and forward is towards the front. So the truce discussions actually just lengthen the war, and that kind of makes sense in a twisted sort of way. I want that card because I want to extend the game possibly, so I'm willing to throw this card away. I took a card draw because I got a command who's doing exactly what I want them to be for now. Somehow or another, the mandatory other epidemic, we had a pestilence here, this is an epidemic, is hitting at the same time, or in the same turn. And it's just, you know, the armies are going to be in much, much worse shape after this. And with Nassau's command here, it might make sense to launch an attack into here. Of course, it's bad terrain, there's a fort. I'm a little outnumbered, and I wouldn't want to do it, I think. I'm not really outnumbered. I've got the same number of troops, but I'm a little outgunned with the fort and the defensive terrain. But I would be able to pull something in, but my morale's not high enough. So I think we will choose not to use him, I guess. Myself not activating and not declaring an activation and drawing cards, and probably shouldn't. So this command here, it's got nothing it can do. I can't leave this fort. If I do so, it basically falls, and it's worth a whole bunch of victory points, 10. It's what the game is named after, is the Venetians trying to take that. So yeah, you know, my thinking is, okay, draw a card. Well, unfortunately, I got cards I want to play, and cards I do not want to throw in the discard pile, because there's only one card left. But yeah, after making that decision and drawing the card, I find myself in an impossible situation where I would have rather just activated and done nothing. Particular situation, although I'd have to check the list of provinces I'm allowed to raid. Boy, is that an annoying feature, right? I mean, I wish there were little, I don't know, colored dots, no, not unless they were very muted. These yellow triangles are disturbing enough as it is, but some kind of indication of which provinces you can raid more easily. Again, it's an option. It's part of the advanced rules, and the advanced rules are just not as well supported in the game in a lot of ways. But yeah, what would I have been able to raid? The Austrian player can raid all eligible with a name west of Gradisca. So yeah, I would have been able to raid this because it has a name in it. So that's a pretty good sign. Or this, and that would have let me play the card, gotten some of this, and gotten supply, which means nothing because it's only applicable between turn. Because you're only in supply when your supply can be of no use. I'm able to take that action, and I actually have a force that is fairly large. Capable of using more than 2 units for the raid, and I succeed. That gets my morale up a little bit, and I did not remember to push this back for that epidemic. Wrong way, this way. I think, I don't know. But yeah, everything's very, very static, and that makes sense. But the supply rules really feel like a nasty set of handcuffs, and they should. However, where I really feel most pained is that Austria doesn't count as a camp, that Venice doesn't count as a camp. I think that they should project a range of supply, and given the terrain around Austria especially, it's just gonna be one space out for the most part. You could make it into here, I guess. I don't know. Here. But remember, it's only 3 movement points for supply lines from the camp. So making the capital, the supply source, also a camp allows you a little bit of flexibility and makes this area up here somewhat interesting. Of course, maybe you want to be able to throw a Venetian threat from the center, which can affect both sides, to make a threat to Austria, that Austria would have to move its camp up to defend its capital area. But this actually isn't worth any victory points. Now, granted, if you can take their supply source, you pretty much have knocked them out of the game in a lot of ways. So that might be good enough, but and there are points near it. There's no question of that. All right, I guess I'm on another chit draw with whatever I'm thinking. But, you know, I don't mind that they handcuff me. I feel like they handcuff me a little too much in terms of not being able to defend my primary supply source at all. And they do feel very, very limiting. So it's hard to get your camp close enough that you can invest a city. But again, I may be okay with that. Fair number of chits left. They did a couple of raids here and up here, none of which did them any good. They were doing them basically to get their morale up more than anything else. Well, because no other effect really has an effect. And that is going to... one thing is the Austrians grabbed the last card. So on the next draw, and games don't define this. We had a general rule when games don't define it, which is reshuffle the deck when needed. Which is to say, okay, the deck is done, but more cards might go into the discard pile before the reshuffle. And so we just did this as a general rule, you know, house rule, but it's handling something that tends to be ambiguous in games, is when do you reshuffle the deck? Do you reshuffle the deck when the draw deck is empty, or when the draw deck needs to be used? And doesn't make much difference. It is convenient to reshuffle it when the draw deck is empty in most cases, because you can hand the cards to somebody who's not doing anything and they do it at that point. If wait until you need to draw a card, then you have a pause in play. That's the basic argument on that. Anyway, the chits are done. I think I've pulled all the activation markers off. The raids stay, and the turn moves forward. And we're moving into a morale turn. And there's only 2 more turns left. It is not likely that Austria is going to be able to do anything. They've got Matthias's forces here, but... you know, those cards I've wanted to play to bring things in, there's just not enough time for them to do anything. I actually have an obligatory card here that's going to help me a little bit, as long as I don't lose my supply line and from the camp going back. And although that's tenuous, there are 2 paths. There's one going around this way, so there's a safe way through, probably. It's not going to be easy for Venice to cut that off, and they don't know that they need to. Alrighty. From my point of view, you can see why this kind of period doesn't get a lot of coverage, especially at this kind of operational level. That handcuffing I'm talking about. Well, I just drew a good command. I have a lot of different places I might want to use this. And some of this, you know, has to do with the chit pull type design. It would be a very different situation if I'm looking at the whole board and, I got a couple of areas that I want to move something, reposition something, and that's the turn. But instead, here I am, and this has to do with the chit pull, the CDG style, whatever. Not that this is CDG, but that pulsed activations, where it kind of doesn't really feel that exciting, to basically look around. Now, I wanted to play some cards, so I played them. One of them, well, I had to play some cards. I had to play this mandatory card, and I recovered some units outside of supply. Again, I'm not going to look that up. And then I was able to extend the game. But this is one of my best commands. One of the very few commands I can actually maybe do something with, and I can't. I can't give up this space. I mean, I guess I could raid Malfancon, but my morale's as high as it can go, and there's nothing I really want to do there. I can't afford to leave this space to launch an attack, and that makes sense. This is not a period where I can coordinate, yeah, I'm attacking here, and someone else is moving in. If I move out, there's a chance I might lose the area. Again, if this was straight I go, you go, I would shift some forces here, shift some forces around everywhere else, and I would maintain my static line, which actually doesn't feel very historical if that's the case. There's something very nice about the chit pull in that it opens up these gaps where I'm handcuffed. But it's also somewhat, at least to me, and probably to many, many people, which is why World War II is so exciting to people, depressing maybe? I don't know. To feel like, wow, I can't do anything. And that's much of what this game generates, is this, there's not really much I can do, you know? And for me, and not so much maybe for the, you know, I want to play out these broad East Front maneuver campaigns with tanks. For me, I don't mind that I'm moving a few forces around to solidify my border, which feels more World War I-ish, still too coordinated, rather than the, I just can't do anything. I'm just handcuffed. And I can't even draw a card, not that I particularly want to, but because I don't really want that deck coming into play and coming out more rapidly, because there's too many things in it that maybe help the Venetians. But I definitely wanted to spend the card to get this out there, and I had to, I was forced into a certain play. So in a lot of ways, this game handcuffs you. It forces you into inaction, or maybe making a bad choice or a risky one. And I'm okay with that from a historical standpoint. From a gameplay standpoint, to some extent, you feel unable to make certain choices. Okay, so this actually has what I was looking for. This is a mandatory card that is not thrown in there. And I believe it indicates whether this has been played and what it allows to play. And maybe there's no need for any others of these. I was definitely looking at this card and saying, hey, have I played this card or not? What this doesn't do is it doesn't tell me to put this chit anywhere or anything. And that other card doesn't tell me to go look for this chit. So again, I'm pretty sure this has been played. It's a mandatory. I've been through the deck once already. I know it's been played. And I think I've actually had the card 36 played as well, but I'm not positive. It is also not in here that I see. So I'm not, 36 looks like a 16, 17 card though, and it must have come out, you know, again. I don't know. But anyway, what am I doing? I'm drawing a chit. Attempts an audacious attack of sorts. They're leaving Palma completely undefended. Well, not exactly. It's still a walled fort. And it's got something in it which I think means, in terms of this bombardier, I think means I can't just walk in there and take it. So I launched, though, my blue command right into attack. Now, did I want to play this? I probably did. Place one Usochi. Yeah, I wanted to play this. Place one Usochi unit in the Caruso, or do we know? I don't know what Usochis are. These are Usochis. Do I have Usochis? I don't know. I have these. No, those aren't me. No, Caruso's here. Yeah, this is only a Venetian or an Austrian card. Yeah, so I don't want to play it. So anyway, I launched an attack in there. It's not a high probability attack, but it was about a 50-50 to tell you the truth. And the Venetians got the advantage, or the Austrians got the advantage in combat, forced a second round, and caused some casualties. And you can see it did not go well. That's life. It was, like I say, close to 50-50, not quite. Like I could have killed off engineers instead of taking these disruptions. And in fact, did I take a death? I did not take a death, so I'm okay. I probably do not want to take a death of a real unit because my engineers are not really effective right now. Anyway, back to another chit pull, but yeah, this was one of the few operations where I'm like, yeah, that's worth doing. Another attack launched. This time again, the Austrians held out and did more damage than they caused. They lost their engineers now. This time it was launched by Nassau, leaving this fort open. Is this a problem? Well, I could just walk in and take it. But on the other hand, maybe what I'm holding here is more important. Who can tell? But by launching it again, I'm taking a shot at Gradisca. We're close to the end of the game, and the Venetians can't do coordinated assaults or anything like that, so this seemed like a good idea. We got repulsed. This time the Austrians did not want to go a second round. They just pushed the Dutch, I guess, back out. Well, Nassau is kind of weird. It's I don't know. I mean, House of Nassau is, but I'm thinking. I mean, that's the Orange family, but I'm thinking that Nassau itself is actually within the empire and didn't get included in the Dutch Republic. But I'm not positive about that. Anyway, and don't want to look it up. So on to another chit pull, but some exciting stuff is happening, and we're seeing Gradisca, being pushed to the edge of things. Does it matter? No, Venice is going to win no matter what, but it is kind of cool to see the goal of the game actually under threat. The Austrians got an activation. They got lucky because they had a mandatory, but they had something they wanted to move. They wanted to fall back to Trieste, just so Medici, who has replaced Giustiniani here. That's now this is much later, but Giustiniani was I think the name of the engineer at Constantinople. So anyway, he's falling back here just so Trieste doesn't fall for nothing, which would be kind of a shitty thing. That's been available for some time, but not easily. It would take 4 movement points, and he doesn't have cav or anything. This is probably going to fall back to here if he gets the opportunity to do so. But we also got ourselves some reinforcements up there, which makes it easier for Matthias to move forward, I guess. And running through the end of the turn, Matthias is indeed moving down. Medici has moved back to here. You can see the Istrian forces have pushed their way forward. I mean, I can't launch an attack here without the supplies here. I didn't want to move my camp down to, I considered it. I didn't want to move my camp down to Rosazzo, and I didn't want to move these troops there either. Not because there's artillery or anything, but because this could actually just launch out an attack. conceivably, or something could. And with the right sequence of moves, like red moves into here, purple moves into there, there's some risk I could lose my camp, and that could cause me to not be able to launch these attacks against Gradisca for whatever that's worth. Again, I'm in pretty good shape as the Venetians, so I don't need to grab another victory center, but I would like to. Otherwise, not much happening, and that's sort of the nature of the game. You draw a chit, you look, do I want to draw a card? Is there something little that I can do? Whatever. For the most part, these actions are pretty small. And it's the same situation with CDGs, right? You draw a card, you figure out, well, do I want to move this piece? Do I want to do this? Generally, they're not these big sweeping things that are momentous. But this game feels a little bit more static than most of the pulsed type of things, which is, I think it's completely historically appropriate. There's a reason people don't want to play these kind of periods. It's a situation of slow investment and encroachment of territory. I do like it, but it's harder for me with the pulsing, especially when I've got the camera online, to be kind of seeing what's going on and enjoying the flow of the game. Point out, the Venetians made a number of attempts at raiding throughout this. They did not succeed in any of them, which is why the Venetian morale is so low, which is preventing the kind of overwhelming attack on Gradisca that we actually need. I guess sort of the victory for the Austrians at this point is really, can I keep my camp from getting cut off, and can I keep Gradisca alive? The stretch goal would be, can I get Gordisha, maybe with Matthias here? That would be a big, big deal. The hard part for that, my supply line means that I can't launch from any further away than here, right? Because the camp can only trace 3. Well, this is 2. This would be 4. That mountainous terrain prevents me from being able to do anything too exciting. And I can't really afford to give this space up. It's an important space. It's not the best place in the world for the camp to be. It's not the worst, I mean. But if the camp was here, it would be 2, 3, and then I could use Matthias. Of course, in that case, I don't need Gordisha, so whatever. Coming close to the end here. I'm about to take a dump, and that's when I often do my best thinking, when I'm like trying to hold something in. No, I've been puzzling about in my head, and I don't like tinkering with things, and there are certain aspects of this that I think are absolutely correct historically. Things like the camp not being able to move unless a force is with it. Well, to some extent, you really ought to have your camp guarded anyway. So if you happen to leave it alone, I don't like the idea of the camp being so mobile that you could just say, okay, I'm not going to move a given force on the board and instead move the camp, or something along those lines. I think that's incorrect to try to give it that kind of mobility to leave it alone, and it would actually encourage incorrect activity. So I think I would stick with the rules with the camp movement. There are 2 little tweaks that I'm thinking, and if I get to these in my review, that's great. But one would be, again, I think that your supply source should be treated as a camp in terms of being able to project supply. Again, that makes the advanced game still very, very restrictive. In terms of the main location where the conflict is going, you're still going to want your camp there, but you have sort of a permanent camp at your supply source, as long as, you control that space. That allows you to defend your supply source a little better, because otherwise you have to rely on keeping your camp near your supply source to be able to protect it. I'm a little iffy on that for one reason. it creates one interesting strategic decision, which is you could decide to go after the other guy's supply source and position your camp up there. So this one, I'm kind of on a, I don't know which way to go, but given that the basic game doesn't restrict you by supply at all, I kind of think that the advanced game's supply restrictions may be a little too restrictive, but you may be getting rid of an interesting choice as to the focus of the campaign. I don't think anybody would focus their campaign up there. If they do, let's say the Venetians focus their campaign up there, because an Austrian move towards Venice looks almost impossible without cutting through the main area of the board where the camp would come back into play. Let's say the Venetians focus up there. Well, then they're giving up on where the victory points are. Maybe early in the game it makes sense, but it would create for a really lousy game overall. And of course, the alternative to it is the Austrians can move their camp up there too and defend it, and then we're just not playing down where the victory points are, and that's, I don't know, I guess you end up with a tie probably in that case, with neither player actually trying to engage in gaining victory points. Okay, so the other side of it, the other thing that I really do think needs to be fixed is this concept of supplies from raids. There's a hint that, you're supposed to be able to supply yourself by raiding. My feeling with that is to use these counters not as out of supply markers, but as in supply markers. And I've already discussed this. You take the, if you succeed with a raid, the command, the space that the raid was launched from would get an in supply marker, and the next time they activate, they can act as though they are in supply. But because your out of supply condition generally impacts you throughout. Now, if here's the thing, there's supposed to be cards that are affected by your supply condition. I haven't seen one yet that I recall, but if there is such a thing, just determine supply at that moment, and if you have an in supply marker, you're immune to the out of supply conditions that are in that card. But I haven't seen those cards. There's supposed to be one, but I have not seen it, or supposed to be at least one. At least it's hinted at. Anyway, those are the two that I would consider playing with. And if this was 25 years ago, 30 years ago, I would almost certainly be playing this again, trying it with those new modifications. As it is, I'm not expecting to live long enough to get back to any game ever again, I think. There might be a few exceptions. I think this is a pretty interesting game and a good one. I don't get that much pleasure from playing. I feel like, the big thing now is just documenting as I work through, for whatever reason. I mean, yeah, I get my moments, but, and I've never been a person who was, except for maybe with the exception of Starfleet Battles, I never was really a person who was like, let me keep trying to play this to get the edge, to try to figure out, to try to figure out the game, to become an expert at it or anything. That's just not me. And you might argue that I did try to do that in SFB. And that was just because, I had a couple of opponents who were very competitive and were that way, and I really liked SFB. I'm not, and it was hard to get people to play other games that were, sort of as detailed. ASL is the same kind of thing. It's like, yeah, I would rather play this once and then maybe come back to it in 5 years, although the way war games are coming out these days still, and the backlog that I have just kind of says that's just never going to happen. Even if I live to 100, I'm probably screwed because they just keep coming out. All right. thought I'd kind of miss what I call the dead period, right? There's the dead period of gaming from like the mid 80s. And for me, until 2000, there was almost nothing new. You know, gamers, sure. They didn't put out that many games that I was that interested in. I didn't really get into OCS at that point. I'd played a little bit of it and thought it was cool. But I didn't feel like, oh, I have to play this because, you know, it's World War II. And that's part of the dead period thing. And then, you know, the stuff that was coming out that wasn't World War II was fairly rare and often really subpar, like, you know, a Decision Games or worse 3W release that was, you know, this could be from the 1970s with poorer quality components, sketchier rules, and in general, most of them were not very interesting. There are exceptions. Campaigns of Marlborough is interesting, for example. And then we had the AWE stuff, which, you know, for the most part, I couldn't get my hands on, not having the kind of internet access that there is today. So, yeah, I picked up a couple of those. You know, I picked up EU, I picked up Russia when it came out. I had Hispania, I think, early on. And obviously, La Gran Guerra, as soon as that came out, I was like, oh, that's what I thought Russia was. Okay, well, I want that too. But overall, yeah, I mean, there just wasn't a lot that I was aware of. Meanwhile, GMT is making, you know, its inroads, and things like GBOH and everything are happening. And all kind of stuff is happening. It's just below the radar because I'm dealing with physical stores for the most part that aren't carrying too much. I mean, I was aware. I picked up, not Wild Blue Yonder, obviously, but the Rise of the Luftwaffe, Down in Flames. When that came out, I was aware of the great battles of history. I played Alexander. Boy, did that look hideous in its first incarnation, which I actually have now, but I played that with a friend. Anyway. Had I been keeping up and been more, you know, connected to the internet and known what was going on, yeah, there would have been lots and lots of opportunities. I didn't have the money back then. Now, you know, I don't. Now I make real money and have only this really as a hobby and live like a pauper for the most part. Although this house definitely costs more than my place in Phoenix did. All right, let's stop babbling, I guess. Just an interlude of garbage. Starting the next turn with some disruption in the Venetian pieces up here. Hey, the Austrians can send small forces forward to push forward, and, you know, this is kind of exposed. Granted, there's not a lot of time, but, I mean, the other option, this is the key unit, but I can't use it. And these others weren't going to do much. I also threw myself some units in play up there that aren't going to help me, but, you know, they might help cover some spaces if needed near the Austrian border. Well, near the Austrian supply source. Only paying attention to this little thing where you put the current command in. That helps a lot. I was using other mechanisms, but they aren't as useful. A deep raid down here into Gemona by a cav unit, since the Venetians have kind of lost their northern area forces for the most part. I can afford to do this, and unfortunately I pulled a not very good victory point marker. Shit happens, but I'm actually in range where next turn I could cut Venetian supply completely, and that might be an issue. Got a unit to fall back with, and I've got a bombardier here. I don't know how much that's going to help me at this point. This is the only place I need to blow up, and I've got a breach. Nations are recovering in other ways as well. I was able to recover Nassau on his command. He's in supply, and I got this, which allowed me to recover a couple of units. That'll be over here. Which gives me, I don't know how much, you know, I mean, I don't have the force to go in here easily, but more importantly, got my morale up. So I could actually combine or pull forces in from different places. And that might do. This is going to be too far to command that, so yeah. Launch additional attacks. I had a hit that I did not record. In order to launch additional attacks on Gradisca, I moved this and brought some blues in that wouldn't get an action. Blue has already been activated, but it wasn't. Those units weren't, and Nassau's already been activated. So this allowed me to bring a larger attack in. It probably wouldn't have succeeded, but anyway, I got outgunned and forced back. But that means I'm giving up Monfalcone. Rubia is now kind of free and loose, which might mean Gortia could be exposed. This was kind of holding them pinned. Now, it's still, you know, Rubia could still be taken, so I don't know how much you want to, you know, put by this movement, but the big deal was this is worth taking, you know, but maybe not at the risk of Gortia, which essentially would give Gradisca up anyway, probably. And finishing up the chits for the turn, Matthias moves into here. These forces here, really putting the pressure on Gorytia. That may well not last, making it all the more important to be able to take this, I guess. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, we're seeing the Austrians kind of resurging. They've gotten some more forces into play. This is the last turn of the game, though, we're coming to. Actually, draws that aren't meaning anything, like counters that don't have units on the board anymore. The Bombardiers I did a draw with. But two things have happened. One, Monfalcone was seized. Was this a good idea? I don't know, because it triggered these units that were back here to move out of here. But it's very hard for me not to grab something like that, even though in terms of victory of the game, it doesn't really matter, whereas this is key. It's just, I have trouble keeping in mind the victory conditions and want to keep doing intermediary actions that are good ideas when I see them happen. Whatever. I don't think that's a big deal. I think Gorytia is going to fall. However, the other thing is these guys push their way up to protect that victory point space. Almost impossible attack against Trieste. I mean, I'm able to block 2 hits here. There were only 3 units attacking. Driven back, but I did cause a hit, which I guess counts for something. I think the game is essentially over. Nassau has marched in with additional strength points that he could bring, and actually captured Gradisca. 1 extra victory point there. But, you know, now I'm sitting on 2 10-point areas. And this one's going to be damn hard to take away. We could probably call the game here, but why do that when we can finish it? And, you know, try to gain some value. An attack into here was successful. I let the cav out because the game's probably over anyway. And the alternative, well, I could have marched to attack there, but which actually would have been the better move, because then I could take the 20 points back conceivably. However, I couldn't because I would be stopped by these units. So yeah, there was no easy path forward. This was the most victory points I could gain using that one command. Pull some reinforcements as well into Gorytia so that Matthias isn't an issue, and some river damage, flooding, whatever, the disordered. The unit's most likely to cause me issues. That also reduced or shifted back the end of game marker. I assume the game doesn't just end right now that we play out the turn, but that gives me some padding. Otherwise, there are events that could have pushed this forward a turn. I play out the remaining, which should all be Austrian chits since all the Venetian ones are here. I drew a card which, you know, I'm not going to be able to use, but would have moved the marker another space back as well, and also caused some more death, preventing the Austrians from maybe, it's hard to tell, you know, because it would kill a unit everywhere. It's a pretty nasty piece. That was drawn, this blue one, I could move Wallenstein in here. That sounds like a nice choice, right? Well, you know, it's a 10-point town and all that, but I can only do a maximum of 1 hit normally. Well, maybe not. I get to fire twice. Oh, no, that's the Venetians. Yeah, I don't have anything that's going to help me there. So I guess I'll just draw a card and hope for the best with the remaining things. That doesn't sound very good. At the end of the line for the game, Matthias launched an attack here because Gorizia looked impossible. This doesn't serve any purpose, but what the hell, you know, again, same kind of thing as moving into here. I just do things sometimes for the sake of doing them. Like finishing the game when I knew it was over. And then moved some other forces down. I got kind of boned because I drew a card which improved the situation here, improved Venetian morale. It's over. Venice has won fairly significantly, 25-3, with no real challenge in place. You know, I struggled understanding what I should be doing and everything, but really, I don't know. I think to some extent I did capture the flow of the game, especially as I started getting further into it in terms of, you know, you bomb your wall for the main city, try to reduce it, try to cut it off. We isolated it. That was very helpful, making it so that it really wasn't possible because you can't move the camp into the place. That's in supply anyway. But it was a problematic situation where the Austrians just didn't have the forces in place to prevent the problems from happening. They did have forces up here, but it's hard to bring things down. Your activations, you don't have any options really. And sometimes you're forced to activate stuff because you drew a card and it's a mandatory card. And now you're going to have to activate a unit, which maybe you didn't want to activate that unit particularly. And then you're kind of wasting something there. But yeah, there's a certain level of paralysis that you just have to kind of accept in order to enjoy this. And, you know, I feel like it sort of came about so that I did eventually. I hear something clicking. I bet you there's a squirrel. Yeah, trying to get some water. That probably means I need to give him more water. Anyway, that's it for this one. Hi, squirrel. And I'll come back with a review of it. Overall, though, you know, I'm happy with this game, which I was worried at points where it felt like there were just too many problems. I think there are some little fixes, and kind of discovering them helped make me happy with it. You know, that it's not going to be a whole bunch of fixes. I think the biggest one is this counts as in supply, not out of supply. If you do that, then things start making a lot more sense. The question whether or not you need to, you know, whether or not you want to turn the supply base, center, whatever, into like a base as well. I can blow hot and cold on that. Other things that I was suggesting, I think I would neglect. For example, being able to move the camp without without having forces associated with it. Just don't leave it without forces, which would be an unreasonable thing. There are cards, though, and situations that require some interpretation, but otherwise it seems to hold up. All right, let's send this up, and I'll give a review where I'm probably saying the same kind of things, but more long-windedly.